Yack.
You're listening to Yack. Yack is the official podcast of the AAF Greater Lehigh Valley Ad Club. Our mission is to inspire creativity and enhance the professional development of the advertising and marketing communities where we live and work. I'm your host, Bill Childs, and I'll talk with artists, designers, writers, directors, photographers, along with those who work in a creative capacity. Our aim here is to serve as a creative resource to help you stay informed, entertained, and above all, inspired. Welcome, Ad Yackers. Today, my guest is David Hoffeld. But first, I want to thank our sponsors, ASR Media and Lehigh Valley with Love. We appreciate your support and collaboration. David is the CEO and Chief Sales Trainer of Hoffeld Group and is the author of the groundbreaking book, The Science of Selling, and has a brand new book coming out in March, Sell More with Science. David and I yak it up on a bunch of interesting topics that include knowing the difference between persuasion and manipulation, how to get out of a sales slump, how to use social proof in your presentations, and why salespeople need to focus on the buying process, not the selling process. We also talk about why he believes your personal life and your business life are linked. Because of the results David's insights generate, he's lectured at Harvard Business School, has been featured in Fast Company, Fortune, U.S. News and World Report, The Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Harvard Business Review, CBS Radio, Fox News Radio, and more. This guy really knows his stuff, and he was gracious enough to take the time to share his insights and knowledge with me on Yack. So here is my Yack with David Hoffeld. All right, David Hoffeld, man. Welcome to Yack.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here.
Glad to have you here. We are going to have fun, man. We're going to talk about some sales process. You have a lot to say on this topic, and I am so excited to have you on as a guest. So let's get this going. Tell me a little bit about just your early career. Like, how did you didn't wake up today and have a best-selling book, a new one about to come out, a consulting group, right? You had to kind of start somewhere. So walk me through that a little bit.
Yeah, so I got into sales like many people my age, and that was kind of by accident. I graduated with my master's degree, needed a job, what I thought would be for a very short time, maybe even the summer. And so I went back where, Bill, you'll remember this, where we used to go to look for jobs, which was the newspaper. And I went to the back and I found the sales job, went down, and they interviewed me, hired me. And over the next few months, I kind of fell in love with what I thought would be just a short-term job to get me some money. And while I looked for what I really wanted to do with my life, I kind of fell in love with the profession of selling and influencing people. And when selling is done right, it's such a beautiful thing that really impacts people on a fundamental level, both buyers and sellers. And I saw this beauty in the profession. And so I dedicated myself to it. And what I started doing after a short time was just devouring sales materials. I mean, almost from day one, reading sales books. And then I just saw like, boy, there's not a lot of evidence anywhere. It's just people's opinions, and they vary from book to book. And they just seem like they're guessing. And so I started applying what I learned from my master's degree, which is researching. And I just started thinking, is there better ways to do presentations? Is what I focused on at first.
Right.
And I started reading journals, and that kind of snowballed into an obsession where I started looking at science. And the more I looked, the more I found how science speaks to every area of the sale, not just how you present, but how buying decisions occur and what creates influence. And so fast forward many, many, many years, in 2009, I launched my firm, Hoffeld Group, and it's grown. And we're kind of the leader in what we call science-based selling, which is not anecdotal based, not based on what happened 20 years ago or what I did back in the day. It's based on what is the real scientific research say creates a buying decision, and how do we align how we sell with it?
Well, what were some things that you sold? What were some things that you sold back then?
Yeah, I sold a number of things, from software to actually training services for a Microsoft product called SharePoint. Back in the day, that was hot. I was VP of sales. Yeah, the company that I started as a salesperson, and then I worked my way up to VP of sales. And we were one of the fastest growing companies in the United States. And that's when I'm like, man, this science really works, because we were just dominating. And that's what kind of, prompted me to start my own firm, which was definitely a journey. We started, as I mentioned, in 09. And a lot of it early was researching. And I used to turn down clients because I was so focused on getting it right. Because I'm like, boy, this is such a new idea and no one had done it yet. And I'm like, I want to make sure that when I introduce it, I'm really focused. So we didn't even have a website till 2014. We just kept growing organically. Right. And I'd say I would turn down 70% of the inquiries. I would just say I can't handle, because I was so focused on researching and refining and testing. And because I wanted a holistic sales system that covered everything based on science, not just, okay, one idea or a little bit here and there.
Right. And or just trying to duplicate someone else's success. Hey, they're having success. Let's just try to duplicate that. Well,
that's most of selling. It's mimicry.
Right. Yeah. Right. And it's funny. One of the people that I look up to in my field, advertising and marketing, is Lee Clow. He was the creative director of Shy Day, did all the Apple stuff, Absolute Vodka. Brilliant guy, recently retired. But one of the things he says is, hey, we're all in sales. Get over it. Yes. Like all of us, you know what I mean? Yes. I don't care what, if you think like, oh, sales, that's not for me. Well, if you're in the creative field, who do you think is going to present your ideas, or how do you think you're going to present your ideas? They have to be sold to somebody, right? You don't just make the pretty pictures and go, isn't that pretty? Do you want to buy it? Well, you have to know how to sell that. Yes. Right? So yes. I love that quote when he said that. We're all in sales. Get over it.
It's brilliant. It's spot on, because what is selling fundamentally? It's influence. And what is influence is guiding people and taking what you or I say seriously and being willing to act on it. So we are all constantly influencing others, even people that say, okay, I don't want to do anything with sales or influence. Mm-hmm. That statement is influential. Or if you say, I think selling is wrong, that's an influential statement. You're trying to influence someone that selling is right. So you can't escape it. In other words, it's ingrained in the human experience. So whether or not you acknowledge it, we're all influencing others, and influence is really selling. Selling is just professional influence, where you're doing it oftentimes where your career depends on it. But we're all influencing one another every day, every time we open our mouths.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I found 3 stats on your website that I want to talk about that I just think are just mind-blowing to me. 63% of salespeople behave in ways that hinder them. 63%, right? 88% of buyers believe salespeople do not understand their problems enough to solve them. Yes. Also, another big eye-opening one. And then this one is just nearly half of all salespeople fail to meet their quota each year. Right. So let's unpack one of these. I want to unpack the one about nearly half of all salespeople fail to meet their sales quota. Why is that? Why do you think that is?
It's a great question. And that's been consistent. What's really interesting about the research on that, and that isn't research that I've conducted, that's what everyone agrees on. CSO Insights is a big one that does that research every year, and others. And it's right in that range. It fluctuates year to year, but it's right around 50% consistently over the last 20 years. Right. And what's interesting is to think about, if you rewind selling the profession 10, 12 years ago, everyone thought, well, social selling or social media or using some of these new tools, LinkedIn and all these could save selling. This is going to change everything. And though those tools are great for sure when they're used well, no question about it, tools can be really helpful. It hasn't changed how successful salespeople are. It stays consistent over the last 20 years of right around that 50% fail to make quota, which is the minimum expectation. Here's what we expect for you as a salesperson. And the reason why is we're focusing on fundamentally the wrong person in the sale too often. In other words, when we think, how should I sell? It's most of the time, as you mentioned, based on mimicry. Well, I'm going to copy Bob down the hall because he seems to do well. So I'll kind of mimic what he does. Or what's also really common is this narcissistic sales approach, which is, how would I want to be sold to if I was the customer? I'll just do that. And what we don't focus on enough, in theory we do, but not in practice, is who we're selling to. And so that's what I think is the biggest gap I see, is that oftentimes we are not focused on what does my buyer need, And that's why I say we need to focus on this science, because it forces you. It forces you to say, okay, how does my buyer's brains make a buying decision? And then I align how I sell with that. And that's the key. Once you do that, all those statistics no longer apply to you, because you are hyper focused on your buyer. And now you're using models that are predictably effective, and you're not focused on yourself, which I think is all of our default. It's, why do we sell the way we do? Most people say, I don't know. That's just how I was taught, or I've seen other people do it. I don't know why it works. It seems to do okay. And so getting outside of that and being hyper focused on the buyer, I think, is a game changer. And it changes those numbers. No longer are half the people failing when it comes to being successful in selling, because we're more able to serve our buyers, and that translates into better outcomes.
Well, this one jumped out at me too, and I have it written down here. Focus on how prospects buy, not on the selling. I mean, that sounds simple enough, but how many people really do that, right? That, to me, that's a big one. So unpack that one for me.
Yeah, it's huge. And I think you're spot on with this one as well, because this is the big problem in selling. When you say, well, how should we sell? And the premise of science-based selling is very simple. The closer your way of selling is aligned to how your potential clients form buying decisions, the more successful you'll be. And the opposite is also true. The further away your method of selling is from how your potential clients form buying decisions, the less successful you'll be. And then the question is, well, how do people form buying decisions? And again, that's where the science comes in that allows us to do this. But without that, where's our North Star? Where's our reference point? Mm-hmm. We're guessing. It's 100% guessing. That's why I have hundreds of sales books on the shelves behind me here in my office, and then in other shelves as well. I have so many of them. And when I pull any two of them off the shelf, they're going to be different. No one writes a sales book that says, hey, my book is exactly like this other one. You're going to love it. They're all different. They're all unique in some way, but they conflict. Which one's right? And it's always anecdotal. Well, it worked for me. It worked for ABC company. And the same forms of evidence is used. And so we're guessing, we're hoping, and hope isn't a reliable strategy. And that's why I'm so passionate, and why I beat this drum of science, because any discipline, any profession, once they start embracing real, verifiable science, things always get better throughout human history, at any point, everywhere. And selling is a little late to the party, but we're trying to wake people up and say, hey, there's a better way. Yeah. And it's based on real science.
Well, I also love this next topic, because there's just so much here. Persuasion versus manipulation. And I've learned, after doing some of the research on your site, I work in a persuasion business, or persuasion occupation, which I was like, oh yeah, I get, and it's also the basis for our democracy. So talk about first persuasion versus manipulation. What is the difference? What is each one? And how do you know if a message is manipulation when you're and how can someone today listening to this try to bring that into their daily sales approach? So talk to me about that, persuasion versus manipulation.
It's an important topic. It's one I cover in my new book, Sell More with Science. We have a chapter towards the end, the 8th chapter, that deals with this, because it is an important thing, because many salespeople have this fear, and rightly so, of they don't want to be the stereotypical 1970s used car salesman, that picture in their mind they have, like, I don't ever want to be that. And how do I distinguish when I don't ever want to manipulate someone? How do I make sure that I don't? So first, we need to understand the difference between persuasion and manipulation. And there is a big difference. So a couple of things we can look at real practically. Number one is intention. When you are influencing someone, effective influence and persuasion is mutually beneficial. In other words, if I'm trying to sell you something, if you say yes, you win and I win, not just me.
Okay.
And so manipulation is always when a potential client, if they say yes, is worse off than they would be if not. And all the cons you and I can think of and list throughout history, that's always consistent of them. When someone goes in with a con, bad things happen eventually, and it's very predictable. So we want to look at our intention. Am I really trying to serve other people? And that's why that focus on the buyer is so important.
Yep.
And that means sometimes maybe disqualifying yourself, that your product or service might not be right.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about that in a second. Go ahead.
Yeah. So that's sometimes, to be ethical seller, if that never comes up in your conversation, then you might want to look at that. So thinking about intention, number one. Second one that's really obvious, but it's so easy sometimes for salespeople to ignore when they're under a lot of stress or when they're struggling with performance, is distorting or withholding truth. And this is a big one. So am I being truly honest? And not just am I saying things that are accurate, but am I withholding information that I know my buyer should know that would help inform their decision that might not be in my best interest? Wow. Am I distorting the truth at all? If so, that is manipulation, right? Because there's again, that gets back to that intention. And then the third is coercion. Am I forcing someone? Do I have to apply extreme amounts of pressure? Do I have to do it or else? Am I resorting to that? Those three things I have found in doing quite a bit of research on this are the three kind of ways to notice, okay, am I engaging in this or not? And one other thing I'll share about this, and we can talk about how to make sure you're always just focusing on influence and persuasion as well. But what I've done research on too, that I talk about in the book, is when are you most likely to engage in manipulation? Because there is some fascinating studies in this area that tell us when two things are happening, you and I are more likely to be tempted to go down this route. Because the reality is there's temptation in every profession, and in selling, this is theirs. Number one, when you're struggling with your sales performance. Oftentimes this occurs when people are new to a job or new to the profession. Oftentimes the greatest temptation to kind of distort or withhold truth is right then. So you want to be aware of this. And if you're a sales leader, you want to be aware of this, because often people's careers get derailed when they just begin because they give into this temptation, and it will destroy your career faster than anything else. The second is when you're under stress. It could be personal, professional. Stress does a lot of things to our bodies. We talk about this. We have some interesting white papers on motivation on our website. But stress it changes how we think. It changes how we process information. So when you or I are under extreme amounts of stress, that also is when we're more likely to give into this kind of temptation. Our resolve lowers. And so you want to be really mindful. When you're struggling, be extra diligent on not compromising. When you're under stress, sometimes that means, calling up someone you care for, or a sales leader or a colleague, and say, hey, I'm under a lot of stress. I want you to hold me accountable this week. I want you to ask me at the end of the week, did I do anything I'm not proud of? And sometimes knowing that conversation's coming will help you protect yourself, because the reality is wishing or hoping that you're ethical isn't often good enough. You have to take proactive steps to make sure that you continue to focus on being an ethical salesperson, because that's really the only way to have lasting success is when you operate with full integrity.
I'll tell you a story. 20 years ago, I was at the morning call, and I was about 5 years into my design career there. And this was T-squares and markers. So this is before computers. And I was being told, the department was being told, the computers are coming. In the meantime, I thought I need a new challenge. So I took a sales position within the morning call, where I sold a specialized product that was it was a single sheet insert. It was an insert, not like a grocery insert. These were more for like local businesses where I would go in, I would talk to them, we'd pick zip codes. I remember I was one of the first people at the morning call that was issued a laptop. The thing was as thick as like a brick, right? Probably weighed about 40 pounds, but no one really taught me like how to sell. So this is what I did, and I want to get your opinion on it.
Yeah.
So I would go in, and remember, I'm a specialized rep, so I wasn't selling the newspaper itself. I was selling an insert, right? You could buy this either 8.5 by 11 or 5.5 by 8.5. So what I would do is I'd go in, I'd introduce myself, we'd get the little pleasantries out of the way, and I'd say, okay, tell me about what you guys are trying to do. Educate me. Just what's the business? How did you start this? Just conversation. And sometimes what would happen is I would realize they're not ready for this program yet. They're not ready. They don't know where enough of their customers are coming from. They don't know. So it would be like a spray and pray. They at that point would be better served running an ad in the newspaper itself. And again, this is before cell phones and all kinds of things. So one of my recommendations was put a little tablet at your front counter, and when people purchase, just ask them where their zip code is. So it'll take about 6 months, you'll get to know. But here's the interesting thing that happened. Every time I did that, and I would say I'd invest like 2 hours, and I would say, you know what, I got to tell you guys, I don't think I can help you. Not because I don't want to, but because my product that I'm selling is not right for your business right now. You could feel the room change. Talk about instant credibility.
Yeah.
Because I could just feel it. They're like, oh, and this is how the conversation would go. Oh, but you just spent 2 hours. But that's what this is your job. I'm like, no. My job is to help your business grow, not me. See, I didn't know to not say that. That's just what felt authentic to me, right?
Yes.
So they would say, well, what do you suggest we do? I mean, I could have told them anything at that point and they would have done it because they trusted me. And they were right to trust me because I wanted that. So I said, here's what I would do. In about 6 months, I'll come back and we're going to know where your people are coming from and we can attack those zip codes and this will be a good program for you. I said, so with that, I'm glad I got to meet you. Here's my card. Have a good day. People wrote letters to my boss about those interactions. I still have them. And I just thought to myself, you know, and 6 months I could set it on my watch. In 6 months, they'd call me back. I'd make the sale. But I had to wait 6 months, right? Yeah. Now, that might not square with someone who's looking to have me meet a quota, but I figured I want to have integrity with this. Yes. Okay. I'm not going in. I could have made plenty of sales with people like that were not ready for the program that I had to offer, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I had to be honest with them and just share with them. But so was I doing the right thing there? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, my thoughts would be that yes, because you mentioned a key word there, authenticity. That you want it to be authentic, and that's really gets to what is selling. Is it just simply getting someone to say yes and sign on the line that is dotted, or is it really trying to serve someone? And right, depending on which of those two camps you fall, will predictably tell you what will life be like in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20. Right, for you as a professional. If you want to be successful in today's transparent marketplace, like this isn't your grandfather's selling environment, right? When you do something that doesn't serve people, you know, they can share it with others quite easily. So you can kill your reputation and drive yourself right out of the profession of selling very quickly by trying to just cram things that people don't need and get some people to say yes because you're persuasive, but you're manipulating them through the process. And then there's always short term you might hit quota your first quarter. Long term, it will run you out of that company and out of the profession in general, because you know the profession as a whole is trying to move away from that old sales approach where just sell it at any cost. You know, it doesn't matter if they need it. And so people that are still dinosaurs that have that mentality are not really treated that well in the profession anymore, because we're trying to move forward. If you want to move forward, great, welcome. If not, good luck, right? Because you're going to get run over by the profession as a whole. So I think you mentioned something, though, that I want to hit on, and that is, how do you protect yourself against falling to manipulative behaviors? One is authenticity, which you mentioned. Okay. And what does that mean as well? That means being you. I'll give you an example. I coached a salesperson, this is a long time ago, who I knew, and he had just started a new job in the insurance industry. And so I went and met with him, give him some coaching. And he said, David, I just started doing a new sales strategy. What do you think of this? And he showed me, he said, he started using a Southern accent. And I'm like, what? Why do you have a Southern accent? He goes, well, the guy down the hall who was the top performer in the company had a Southern accent, and he was a good old country boy, and he talked in a real slow pace. And so did this guy. Now, he was, of course, faking it. That wasn't really him. And I said, I would not do that. I said, because that's going to come across as inauthentic. And that's not why that gentleman is successful. It's not the magic of a Southern accent. Right.
It's
that he's doing a lot of other things right. I mean, just think about this. imagine if he met one of his clients at the grocery store with his family, let's just say.
Right.
I mean, do you use the Southern accent? Do you not? I mean, what would his kids say and his wife if all of a sudden he started talking in the Southern? See, it puts you in these ridiculous situations. So being authentic is not only looking out for your clients, putting their needs before your own, which builds that credibility, and it's how you really foster success long term, but it's also focusing on really being you, right? Just be honest, be authentic, because when you're trying to deceive someone, right, that's the first step to, I mean, you're already down that road of manipulation. When I'm trying to present myself as something I'm really not, that's problematic. And so you want to avoid that. One other thing I'll share real quickly, and this people don't like, but there's so much research on this, your professional and your personal life are linked. And this is something when I was researching for my book, Sell More with Science, this is something that floored me. And I'm like, boy, if I would have known this, this could have saved me a lot of hassle as a sales leader, making hiring decisions. The reality is that when people are unethical in their personal life, it's very hard for them to say, but I draw the line at work. The reality is we're all people. We don't act one way and then act another way. You might be able to fake out other people around you, but what the research shows is really interesting. It's only a matter of time. So one way to clean up your professional life is to also look at your personal life. If you are unethical in your personal life, you want to deal with that, even if you don't think it's a big deal, because it will, when the opportunities come and the temptations arise, you are far more likely to fall. And they've done studies on like CEOs, for example, that have fallen and done things that are unethical and gotten caught. And they say, was there any ways to know this before it happened? Because they're good at covering it up. And researchers found, yes, when you look at their personal life, when you look at the things, you look at the, how often they get in trouble with the law, even looking at things like speeding ticket. I mean, there's little things they can predict, and they can go, okay, if we're having problems in the personal life ethically, then that's a precursor. So they say, be careful. There's been some really interesting studies, even published in the Harvard Business Review, about when you hire senior leaders, you want to do some background checks and take that really seriously. And I'm like, that's a big deal. So it gives us also a way to protect ourselves, is to analyze not just what you say on your own sales calls or talking to potential clients, but analyze your personal life and say, okay, is there anything here that I wouldn't want people to know about? And if so, clean that up, because that's not who you want to be anyway. And it's very likely that same mindset could filter over. And if temptation comes, you're far more likely to give into it. So be really diligent in that area too, which I thought was something surprising from the science. At least it surprised me.
Yeah, I mean, that to me just sounds like, introspection. Take stock. Look at what you're doing. Look at how you're treating people. Look at how, and I'm a huge, huge believer in that the little things make the biggest impact. Mm-hmm. Like they add up. If you're not doing the little things, the big things aren't going to take care of themselves. Mm-hmm. I want to ask you this though. What about slumps? How do you get out of a slump? Someone's just, it's like, I'm doing everything right. I got the integrity going. I know my product. I believe in it. I have passion for it. I'm slumping. What does the science say about that?
Science says there's a lot of things we can do, and you can get out of a slump and also keep yourself from falling into one pretty predictably as well. So if you're in a slump, let's talk about that. Yep. What I would recommend you do strongly is look, are you obtaining, we call them commitments to what are known as the 6 whys. And these are the 6 small decisions that create a larger buying decision. And so oftentimes when slumps occur, in fact, almost always, it's because we're not obtaining a certain commitment. And so if that's something, and the 6 whys real quickly are why now, why change, then why now, why your industry solution, why you or your company, why your product or service, and then why spend the money. And if you're focused on all of them, which we walk you how to do in both of my books, it gives you a kind of a framework, if you will. And now when you're in a slump, you go, okay, which of those am I not focused on? And that's where you dive in. A second thing I would recommend you do real practically is when you are selling well, record your presentation. Break it up into small pieces, each step of your sale, and record it. You don't have to be in front of a client. Just pitch the mirror, pitch your significant other, talk to yourself, but record it. Then when you go into a slump, You can listen to how you were selling when you were effective. And oftentimes that will alert you as well as like, oh, I didn't realize I haven't done that. Or, oh, I used to say that. Now I'm doing this. Okay, that makes a lot of sense as well. Third thing I'll share about slumps, how not to get into them, is something that I think is mission critical is those 6 whys I just mentioned. When you are conducting sales calls, whether you win or lose the sale, you want to conduct a win-loss analysis. And that is at the end of the sale, you say, okay, where did I get commitments of those 6 whys and which ones did I not obtain commitments to? Because usually with most salespeople, the majority of your lost sales are because you're not obtaining commitments to 1 or 2 of those whys. That tells you what to focus on. And so that way you're able to alert yourself before you ever go into a full-blown slump. You're like, boy, okay, I'm really struggling more than I used to on getting that why change. And so what can I do now to get stronger at that? And it tells you where to focus on. And that's the key with slumps. Oftentimes people don't know, okay, where do I start? Like, what's causing it? Think about it from the buyer's perspective. Your biggest problem in selling is lack of commitment from your buyers to one of those things. And if you get commitments to all the 6 whys, the sales almost always occurs. And if you don't get commitments to even one of them, it never occurs, ever, 100% of the time. They're not going to say yes, but not be convinced they should do it now, or not be convinced of your company or your product, or they should change it all. They're not going to do it. So if you're hyper-focused on their buying process and you're using that to align how you sell and focus on that, it gives you tremendous insights on how to not fall into slumps with those win-loss analysis. And second, if you do, where do I focus? Because time is not your friend when it comes to a sales slump. If you're slumping, you want to identify why and correct it immediately, because over time, it starts to mess with your mind. You get negative. And now you can have an issue with how you're thinking, not just how you're selling. And that can make it much more challenging to pull someone out of a slump. So I would say be proactive with those win-loss analysis. But if you do find yourself in a slump, focus on the 6 whys, cut out all the other noise, start right there. I guarantee you, once you understand those, it'll tell you where to focus on. You dive deep into that, and you're going to find the reason why you're in that slump.
Walk me through a typical buying process. What do you see? How do you see that? How do you see the typical buying process going? Walk me through that.
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways depending on the sales environment you're in. I mean, there's some sales that happen very quickly, some that take weeks, some that take months, some that take years. But regardless of how long they are, our brain's decision-making process doesn't change. In other words, it's those 6 whys. So when you or I, as a consumer or a business person, are constructing a buying decision on our own, what are we thinking through? Why should I make a change at all? If I'm committed to that, why do I need to do this now? Why can't I procrastinate? If I'm committed to that, why do I need the salesperson I'm talking to? Why do I need their industry in general, them or their competitors? Why can't I create something on my own? Maybe it's not as good, but maybe I can do it cheaper or faster. And then once I say, okay, I can't do that, then what is the right company to partner with? Okay, then what is the right product or service? And then finally, why should I spend the money on this? There's a lot of things I could spend money on. Maybe this is a problem I need to solve, but it's not as important as some other issue I have going on in my business. Why should I do that? So that is the buying decision. That can sometimes, depending on how many people are involved, that could take years to guide someone through all that, or it could take 30 minutes, depending on the sales environment you're in. But anything you or I buy, whether it's a candy bar at a grocery store or some multi-million-dollar piece of equipment, we're going through that. Now, usually it's unconsciously. We don't sit often and agonize over each of those commitments. Though sometimes we would on a larger decision we might. But the key for me as a seller is when I understand what's going on between my buyer's ears, that's what I'm focused on. So in other words, I'm not trying to sell them anything. I'm trying to guide them through that buying process that there is innate within them. It's how their brain works. And so I'm helping them through that buying journey. I'm not trying to cram anything down their throat. I'm guiding them through the process I know they need to get through. And that is a tremendous value add that you can do when you're selling, because that's the biggest problem in sales today. The survey data shows is people are overwhelmed with information and they don't know how do I make a decision I'm going to feel good about? There's so much information in the marketplace on everything and so many competing options. And so when we as sellers can focus on guiding them through their buying process, it is, I'm finding today, the biggest competitive advantage you can have is not what you sell, but how you sell.
And there's ways to check in as you're in that process with them, right? To kind of see where you're at. You can almost kind of take the temperature as you're moving through that process, which is kind of, to me, that's a game changer, right? That's brilliant. Like you don't have to wait to the end and be like, okay, what do you think? You want to buy? You can check in on them. How talk to me about how you do that. Give me one example.
Yeah, that's a great point. So you can, regardless of the kind of sales cycle you're in, you want to be heavily focused on those commitments. And you want to guide them in thinking through them, right? So I'm presenting, why do we have a sales process? It's to obtain those 6 commitments. So let's say I'm talking about why change, which is often the first one. I present them in numerical order, but our brains it's sloppy as we form a buying decision. They can come in different orders depending on the context. But why change is often first. So if I'm engaging someone, until I create, for example, the curiosity to consider change, I'm going to be thought of as irrelevant, because why would someone want to meet with the salesperson to talk about a solution that they don't even know they need to change in that regards? So that why change is kind of often the very first one. So I'm going to be heavily focused on that. And I want to, let's say I'm selling to numerous people. I want to engage each of them in this so that we're either committed to change or at least open to it. So now I can talk about what that change would look like. And so I'm going to ask them, not just present and hope that they're engaged, but I'm going to start saying, does it make sense why, based on what we've talked about, Bill, why making this kind of change would be beneficial for your business? And they might say, well, yeah, it really does. Or they might say, you know what, I'm not sure yet. And then but now I know what's going on. Whereas what a lot of people do is they think of commitments at the end of the sale. It's at the close. That's when I ask them to buy. And then that's a surprising roller coaster. We're not sure what happens, what's going to happen. But what we want to do is we want to engage them in these big commitments throughout the entire sale. So I always know where you're at. So if you're struggling with one of these commitments,
it's a check-in. This is a check-in as you're going through, and you adjust as you need, or you kind of go, oh, there's a signal there. They gave me what I can move on to the next, right? I mean, I love it. It's fantastic.
Yes.
Fantastic. What about social proof? I know that's a big one. You talk about that a lot on your site and stuff. Let's talk a little bit about social proof.
Yeah, social proof is a big idea. It's exciting. So what is social proof? It connects the persuasiveness of an idea with how other people are responding to it. It's why we are all drawn to best-selling books or blockbuster movies or businesses with lots of satisfied customers, or even on Amazon. I know I'm always looking at the Amazon reviews. And if it's 4-star and everyone says good things, I'm like, okay, low risk. If it has 1 star and there's a lot of bad comments, I'm like, probably not, right? And so that's social proof. We're all persuaded by that. And what's really interesting about social proof, it is one of those scientific principles that has been around for a long time. There is research on social proof from 1908 on how, in fact, some of the most famous studies on social proof were conducted in the 1950s and 60s, and we're still studying it today. Why I mention that is because unlike a lot of sales methodologies that are here today and they're tied to market conditions, and then 5 years from now, the authors say, yeah, don't do that no more. That don't work. Here's what you should do. Right. Social proof has been around forever. In fact, just recently, Wharton Business School said the number one way, they say, that businesses can establish trust with their potential customers is social proof. So this is a powerful scientific principle that we can use, and you can leverage social proof in so many areas. I mean, it can be sharing about your clients' stories and how they've had a positive outcomes from your product or service. Social proof can also be used. One of my favorite ways to leverage it is when you're going to ask a challenging deep dive follow-up question, to frame it with, Bill, a lot of people that I talk to have that as a concern we've just discussed, but I'd love to get your opinion on how do you think that has impacted your business, right? I can frame things with social proof, and then I'm much more likely to get compliance. So social proof, like all these scientific principles, is true today. It was true in 1908. It'll be true 100 years from now, because it's based on how our brains work. And so in other words, when you learn this stuff, it's not like 5 years from now, you're going to be like, well, that doesn't work anymore. Let's try something else. I mean, your great great grandchildren will be using social proof. It's how we work. It worked 100 years ago. It'll work hundreds of years from now. And that's what's empowering is when you learn this, you have it for the rest of your life, because you can use social proof in any area of life, not just selling.
I have to ask this as someone who spends a tremendous amount of time using creativity.
Yeah.
Does creativity come into sales at all?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's critical. We need to be professionally nimble. The ancients called it practical wisdom. The Greeks called it, which is where we're able to, in selling, adapt to every unique buyer. So even if you have a very detailed sales process or even sales scripting, oftentimes you'll need to go off of that and customize that for the person you're talking to. So I'm a huge fan of customization of sales process. Normally, when salespeople say, can I customize it? And I say, what do you mean? They say, can I make it my own? That I'm not a fan of. I'm not even sure what that means.
Yeah,
but
I don't know
neither are usually they. But what I'm a fan of is make it your buyers. Customize it for them. Now, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So absolutely, creativity is key. What I found in sales, what really helps be productively creative, because creativity in sales can be good or it can be really, really, really bad, where you're like, oh, please don't do that again. That was terrible. Is what are you basing it on? And that's why, again, to beat that drum, when you understand the framework of how people make a buying decision, now it empowers you to be nimble, to go, okay, I know what I'm trying to accomplish. I'm in a unique situation or in a challenging situation. Now I can go over here. I can pivot. I can frame it this way. I can leverage this or that. And so it gives you now the freedom to be productively creative in a way that serves your client, rather than just making up ideas that may or may not work. So it brings predictability as far as effectiveness in the creativity, and in sales, that's what matters.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit I can't believe this hour is going by so fast already. Let's talk about the book. So you have Science of Selling. You wrote it. Fantastic book. And you have a new one coming out. I can see it behind you there. Sell More with Science. So talk to me about how you came to write the book, and just what happened after you wrote it. And obviously now it's the Science of Selling is coming out on paperback, and you have the new one. When does the new one come out?
March 22nd.
There you go. All right. So talk to me about the book and writing a book.
Yeah. So writing the book was something I wanted to do, is to put this down and get it out to more people. It came out, The Science of Selling, in 2016. And it has gone all around the world. It's been translated into many languages. And literally every day I get notes from people that say it's positively impact them, which is really, really exciting to hear. But writing the book was, I wanted to share some of the research and what was making such a big impact for the clients I had. And so I put this in a book form, and writing the book took 10 years, The Science of Selling.
Wow.
And it took a long time because of the research. The way I write books is different than the way many of my colleagues in sales profession write books. So because it's so much research, in other words, if you find an idea in The Science of Selling that you say, I want to go deeper in that, I want to understand that a little more. We have hundreds. I mean, there's over 400 different citations in the book to journals, to academic journals, scientific journals. So if you say, I want to dig deeper into that and see the research for myself to see where David came up with these ideas, you can do that. And so there's total transparency. And so because of the amount of research and the amount of testing, like those 6 whys I mentioned, that took me over 6 years to create, looking at the research out there. And then that was unique in creating, okay, how would I put that in a sales context, testing it, making sure it was aligned with all the research, hundreds and hundreds of studies that have looked into this. And so it's very time consuming, but it takes a long time to write a book, at least the way I do it. But the nice thing about a book is it lasts. I got comments today on the book, a number of comments people sent me today, and it came out in 2016. And so it's something I take it really seriously. For me, I really care about selling. I care deeply about people. And I think if you stand up and tell people how you should sell, that impacts them on a personal or professional level. It impacts their families. It impacts those they sell to. You need to have reasons for it. I am not a fan of people just sharing what worked for them when they have no idea why it worked. I say, please don't. It needs to be based on something real when it comes to selling. And so I take that really seriously. So I want to make sure that anything I share is backed by science. I know it will work 100%. And
that's
so
that's what I think is just so brilliant about what you did is, you tied it to science.
Yep.
I mean, you tied it to science. What does the science say? I hear you say that a lot. Let's look at the science. What does the science say? Not so much what does David Hoffeld say, but what does the science say, right? I just think that's awesome. And I wonder, too, if you're in sales and you're not using these principles, how are you selling? Could be just kind of that, I don't know. I just think that from a sales perspective, which is why I wanted to talk to you on the podcast, is I just think what you're doing and what you're talking about it's important. It's important for a lot of people to know about it. And I love that you're doing it. Tell me the story. I think you told me one time about when you were writing the book, how you had your day job and then you came home and you had kids crying in the background and you were like, oh my God, like I can't believe I'm so tired and I'm sitting here writing this book. I mean, that's the discipline, right? That's you want a best-selling book. That's what you got to do. So just tell me a little bit about how you did that.
Yeah. So when I got my book deal for The Science of Selling, we were really blessed that Penguin Random House published it and then the new book as well. And so of course I'm motivated. Okay, let's write this. And I had a really crude draft of it already written, but it wasn't refined as far as the way it was presented. And it was a lot of my research notes essentially. And so I was swamped. I mean, I was working with clients at this point. I was busy, training. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to find time to write this book. And I wasn't able to. In fact, I would say, okay, I'm going to try to write today for at least 2 hours. And then today would happen. Stuff would come up and I wouldn't do it. And I was starting to really get concerned because I was falling behind schedule. And so I kind of, what I do for my clients, I kind of did for myself. And I said, okay, I don't know what to do here. What does science say I should do? So I started reading, how do you follow through on the things that you want to do? And I struggled. I stumbled on something that I refer to as action triggers, which connect a behavioral with an environmental stimulus. What that means essentially is what I did, my action trigger was I said, okay, I'm going to write my book after I put my kids to bed. And so every night after I put at that point, I just had 2. Now I have 3 children, but at that point I only had 2. And after I put them to sleep, I would go down in my home office and I would write for between 2 to 5, 6 hours a night, every single night for quite a while, a couple of years, and really refining this book. And so that saved me. So I actually went to science and go, what did I do? And it said, don't try to muster up the willpower to do what you want to do. Instead, link it to in other words, if, for example, if I wanted to work out more, I might say, instead of saying I'm going to try to work out today, which is unlikely, you create an action trigger, which has been shown in so many studies to increase the likelihood you'll do what you want to do. After lunch, I'll work out for an hour. Or on the way home from the office, I'll stop at the gym and work out for 45 minutes. Connecting it to your environment so it's a preloaded decision. And that saved me. And that's why almost all of The Science of Selling was written between the hours of 9 p.m. and 3 a.m. Because for me, when you're writing, some nights it clicks and sometimes it doesn't. Sure. But when it clicks, I talk about it like riding a wave. Yeah. Like, hey, when it's flowing, when you're putting the ideas down and it's really going, I ride that wave until I get until it throws me off. Because sometimes with writing, at least for me, it's like, man, this is rough. And you push through, and other times it just flows. You get into that flow state and you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to ride this wave for as long as I can. And so that would be like a late night, 3, 4 in the morning. But I'm like, hey, you do what you got to do.
Right. Life is hard. I'm curious, did you ever, as a chapter you were writing and thought, you know what, I'm going to try this tomorrow on one of my sales. Like you could almost like kind of test it like in real time, write it and then test it and go, wow, that did work.
Yeah, well, everything I write, I tested a lot beforehand, just to see how it would apply in the real world of sales. That's why it took 10 years to write the book, to have it done. But yeah, I live this stuff. This isn't for me a hustle.
You're very passionate about it.
Yeah, I live it. In fact, I've had clients say one of the things we liked about you was we read your book and then you tried to sell us your services and like, yeah, you're doing it. I'm like, yeah. And that's integrity too, right? If you say one thing and do another, well, that's a definition of not having integrity. So yeah, I'm like, hey, I believe in this stuff. I live it. I know it works. And I've seen it transform people's lives. And the first person whose life it transformed, quite honestly, was mine. I mean, back in the day, I started using this and it changed my life. I mean, I grew up dirty poor. I mean, I was homeless when I was 13 years old. I mean, it's a whole interesting story, but I got in the profession of sales. No one in my family had ever made any kind of money. We were always poor.
Interesting.
And then all of a sudden I got in and I started just making money, into the six figures pretty quickly, which I'm like, what is this? I mean, this is unbelievable. And so, yeah, the reason I believe in this is I've seen it over the years transform so many companies and people, but the first person whose life had changed was mine. And that's awesome. Why I know this works. There's research, of course, but it changed my life.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on the first book and congratulations on the second one. It's huge accomplishment. Really cool. Now, if people wanted to get in touch with you or podcast, listen to your podcast, your website, where they can find a book, give me that information. Hit me with it.
Yeah, Hoffeld Group, HOFFELD group.com is where you can go. There's a lot of great resources on the site at no cost. You can check out The Science of Selling. It comes out in paperback in February 8th. And then Sell More with Science is launched on March 22nd. You can check out those books anywhere fine books are sold. You're going to find them.
You also have a really great podcast. That all just through the website?
Yeah, The Science of Selling. You can check it out on our website, or you can go anywhere that you consume podcasts, Apple, Spotify, you name it, it's everywhere. So check that out, The Science of Selling. We put out weekly content. Every Tuesday morning, a new episode is released. So definitely check that out.
Listen, man, I thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I think this was a great conversation. I think this is going to help a lot of people just think about selling differently. And I would hope that they would reach out and at least, engage with you and your book. And because I just think you're awesome. And
I appreciate it, my friend.
Thanks for being on Ad Yack, man.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Be well, all right?
All right, Ad Yackers. Hope you enjoyed it. Because we have many more great conversations planned and guests lined up ready to yak it up. Ad Yack is sponsored and produced by ASR Media and Lehigh Valley with Love. Theme song was written and performed by Dan Ross. Location recording at JT Norman's house. Ad Yack is the official podcast of the AAF Greater Lehigh Valley Ad Club. Stay hungry, stay humble. Till next time.
This episode of Ad Yack is rated O for, oh man, that was good.